Well, thank you everyone for joining us today for another one of the Australian CFO Masterclasses brought to you by Wheel. We are very lucky to have quite an astounding panel today, exploring all of the strategies that we can use to reduce those hefty commercial real estate costs. And speaking from experience, what we're going through as well at Wheel, we grow and then we pause on our growth, and where do we go? So where to go and how to manage one of the larger overheads is particularly pertinent. So I hope everyone gets a lot out of this session. I would like to begin with an acknowledgement of country. So in the spirit of reconciliation, Wheel respectively acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. So, quick overview. We'll have to meet the wonderful Jonathan, Hannah and Matthew. They're going to take us through what the market is doing, how you can discuss this within the workplace, what are those opportunities to save some cash, and we'll give you a few examples and provide a little bit of a case study. But throughout all of this, I highly recommend any questions, any clarifications, please jump in really at any point. We encourage you to get the most out of it that you can. So use these guys as the experts, as the professionals. You can ask specifics, you can ask hypotheticals, whatever you want. So you can use the Q&A at the bottom there. There is also the chat function, which I will be monitoring, so either or. But yes, being as inquisitive as you want, test the people's knowledge. So I am going to hand over to Hannah. But before, I would just like to draw your attention to the fact that I am not Damon, I am Adriana Amato, but I am from Wheel, but I am not the CFO. So a little bit here and there. Damon has had to rush off to the hospital, but nothing too dramatic. So don't stress. But you're along with me today. So I'll hand over to Hannah. As I said, get as much out of it as you want. So your lunch break, get your learnings that you need. Absolutely. I will fade out into the background now.
Thanks, Adriana, and thank you for spending your lunch break with us. Firstly, I'll just give a quick overview of who we are at Tenant CS. We are an independent commercial real estate advisory company, exclusively representing tenants against landlords. So we essentially work with you to figure out the space you require and negotiate on your behalf, so you get the best property on the best terms. Some background on me. I've been with Tenant CS for about 18 months now, and I work predominantly within the Sydney CBD and City Fringe office market. And prior to Tenant CS, I have held roles in leasing in Melbourne. But I do like to think that I've transitioned over to the good side of property. And Matt, I'm sure you're going to say the exact same thing.
You just haven't transitioned to the good state.
I've come back.
It is the good side of property. So look, hi everybody. My name is Matt. I spent 13 years managing portfolios, commercial real estate portfolios on behalf of private owners, syndicates, funds management groups. And then about 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to set up the Melbourne office of Tenant CS. And since then, we've proudly represented clients on savings opportunities, Zipco, Origin Energy, Beyond Blue, and have grown the team down here. John, to introduce you, and I hope I get this right. If not, it sounds very impressive anyway. John spent 7 years at BMW and then 22 years at Clemenger Group. The last 10 were either in a CFO or COO capacity. And in that capacity, he consolidated 35 Clemenger leases down to just 6 in Australia. And he worked very closely with the tenant reps through that process. So saw the true value of what tenant reps add before joining the real good side, joining our business as I call him our executive chairman because he's very hands-on.
Thanks.
Was I right?
Pretty much, yeah. Thank you.
All right. So just I think.
So I'll share my screen now.
Thank you, Hannah.
Okay, that will work for you guys?
Great. So I guess recapping what we'll cover, yeah, that's my attempt to humour there. So we've designed today with an understanding that not every business will use a tenant rep. We do have strong references from past clients, and they will attest that they couldn't have achieved the magnitude of savings or the successful outcome of their project without us. But we also know that there are times that a business will just go it alone. And so over the next hour, we're going to share with you why the market is red hot for tenants, and how to capitalise if there is an opportunity for change, and how that change matches your new workplace strategy. But before we get into the strategies, we thought to word you up on the market conditions. You've all heard it's a tenant market. You know that the vacancy rate is high, and that incentives are even higher. But have you heard the numbers being delivered by someone who fights for tenants? Or are you reading what the property industry floods the papers with? It's what the landlords want you to hear. So first, let's understand the opportunities out there for tenants.
Yeah, so there's obviously a lot of activity going on, I think from a demand perspective, which is being driven from companies reassessing their space requirements, resulting in consolidation or reducing their footprint after companies have transitioned into a hybrid working model. So landlords are competing heavily with fitted sublease space, which means they are providing brand new fit outs to tenants, which forms part of their incentive package. This emphasises the demand for tenants in searching for high quality fitted space, which is also obviously important for occupiers to be able to attract their staff back to the office. In saying that though, that means landlords are now competitive as ever to secure good quality tenants within their assets. In terms of the Sydney CBD, face rents have continued to increase, which I know seems counterintuitive, but this is something that landlords want to maintain, as this obviously affects how they value their assets. On the other hand, though, we are seeing gross incentives remain strong at 35% across all asset classes. This can be offered in the form of rental abatement or a spec fit out, which, as I mentioned, is a strong demand for, and what we call the flight to quality. And it's also why premium grade assets have a lower vacancy than A and B grade assets. If you are looking at vacancy as a whole, there is approximately 10% of direct stock available currently. But when you add in the sublease stock available, which is 13% within the CBD, in addition, and looking to the next 12 months, there's approximately 543,000 square metres of office space that is either in holdover or have upcoming lease expiries. So that's the equivalent of an additional 10% of stock that is ultimately available. So this means, putting that all together, this means that there's essentially 23% vacancy within the CBD over the next 12 months, which then puts even more pressure on landlords to compete for a tenant. And Matt, how's it going in Melbourne?
It's cold, it's raining.
cold, and yeah, not that wet.
Yeah, look, Melbourne had this, I guess COVID caused this perfect storm. Pre-COVID, Melbourne was at 3.5% vacancy, including sublease stock, towards the end of 2019. And so naturally, institutional landlords planned large developments, creating more stock to meet the supply. It's more supply to meet the demand, I should say. And I guess so between the years 2020 and 2024, there was roughly 700,000 square metres of stock to be added to Melbourne CBD. I think that's when it actually overtook Sydney as the largest by square meterage as well. And none of those projects were slowed down. So we now have this glut of stock, the flight to quality, where tenants are upgrading to these new developments, but leaving behind them this in their wake is B grade buildings and A grade that need a fixer upper, and there's still 24% of the marketplace that's available for lease, not just looking at vacancy rates. Next slide, please, Hannah. So it's not enough to know the stats, but you also need to pull on the right levers. You need to know who you're up against when you're going into a savings strategy, any project. So whenever we're planning for a negotiation with a client, we first try and understand the motivators of the landlords. So we thought to give you, I guess, a 101 crash course in valuations. Landlords are very simple people. It's quite easy. The one thing that they're concerned about is asset value. Asset value. It gives them borrowing power they've got covenants with their banks that they need to achieve income targets and asset value. They compete with other funds on their assets under management. And individually for executives within those real estate funds, their bonuses are actually paid based on asset value. So asset value being, it's the face rent, which I'll go into what a face rent is shortly, and multiplied by a cap rate or a yield. The yield that is affected by a number of factors that a valuer perceives, with a bit of pressure from the bank as well. But when you look down that list of the things that can affect the cap rate, the only factor that an actual leasing deal can do to affect the cap rate of a building is creating that financial stability. So it's the length of the lease, how secure is that building in lease terms. So we in the industry, we call it a WALE, the weighted average lease expiry profile of the building, but it really is just that financial security. So we talk about face rent, looking, I guess, very crudely at a leasing deal. When a landlord is, well, I guess we do this when we're comparing two properties. We use what we call an effective rent. So that is the incentive after, that is the rent after incentives. The face rent that the landlords look at is purely the rent that's on the lease before any incentives are paid. If you go to the next slide, I guess it makes a bit more sense. So if that same lease of $200,000 in face rent provides a longer lease term and improves the financial stability of the property, it might tighten the cap rate on a building by 50 basis points. And so that tightening of cap value, of asset value, in this case, $600,000 worth of additional asset value, that's how landlords are justifying these big incentives to tenants. Anna, how's the brain? What are numbers?
Yeah,
Matt, sorry, Matt, just to interrupt, there was a comment that you're a little bit hard to hear.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I will speak louder.
Yeah.
So, bringing the focus now back to you, the tenants, the main question in every leasing strategy discussion is, should I stay or should I go? And I promise I won't start singing that. But before we can answer this $1 million question, we need to know what metrics of size, style, and location your ideal workspace needs to be. So understanding your requirements is essentially the first step to any project, and it's imperative to executing a real estate strategy. And whether it is for a single lease or across a whole portfolio, we break it down into how this premises fits into your workplace strategy. Only then we can work out the way to extract savings depending on where you are on your lease cycle and the remaining tenure, and whether you have less than 2 years remaining or above 2 years remaining. So what is a workplace strategy, and where on earth do you start assessing your business's needs? At a very high level, a workplace strategy aligns the physical environment and infrastructure of a workplace with a company's goals, culture, and ideal way of working. So there are a number of considerations when creating a workplace strategy. There are the physical aspects, such as your ideal location. Are you close to public transport? Can your staff easily access the property? Is there car parking? These are all important factors when refining your actual location requirements. When you're looking at the building itself, what aspects are important to your company? Is it the building grade, the amenities of the building? Are they in line with your sustainability guidelines? Or do they offer end of trip or third space, or even just a nice to have with like a lobby, cafe, or a concierge? Moving to your space that's actually required, it's essentially understanding how your business works best. Is everyone coming into the office, or are you working to a hybrid model? Does everyone have a fixed workstation, or are you moving to activity-based working? So these are all the aspects that you need to take into consideration to understand how your business operates, translates into actually your square meters required. And a lot of companies are now moving away from traditional space and adapting more collaboration areas, informal meeting areas, Zoom rooms. Companies are now starting to plan for their average day in the office rather than their peak days, which might happen maybe 2 times a month when they require all of their staff to come in. But these are only some of the considerations, I guess, that need to be discussed when putting together your workplace strategy. But Matt, how can this actually reduce costs?
No, can't hear you, Matt.
Is that any better?
Much
Yes.
better.
All right. Sorry, guys. So look, this analysis was done for a client who had 150 staff in 1,500 square meters. The olden days, it was always just how much space do you need? How many staff you got in times by 10? It was a 1 to 10 square meter ratio. But nowadays, like this client, they challenged us to work with their designers on how much space they can save by adopting a hybrid model. In this case, they were moving to 3 days a week from the office, but that doesn't naturally mean that you can just reduce the office size by that amount. So you can reduce your desk space by 25%, but if you want to get your staff into the office, you need to create collaboration zones. You need to work out why they're coming into the office. And so for this particular client, we saved them, we moved them, we downsized them by 200 square meters and decreased their rental savings. We created rental savings. And in doing that over a 3-year term, we saved them $1.6 million. It was a flight to quality and some strong negotiation in there. Okay, so we've worked out the size requirement. Your CFO's approved your new budget. We can start now looking at those saving strategies. And as Hannah said, we've broken this up into how to extract savings, whether you've got lease term to go, but also if your lease is expiring. Before I get into that, I guess the first question we always get asked is, when do I start? It very much depends on the magnitude of the project you've got. You can never be really too early or too prepared. Preparation's that key, and time is leverage in a negotiation. So I guess, what does it mean to get started? It doesn't mean I'm going to check in with my landlord to make sure that there's another term available to us. It doesn't mean I'm going to start shooting off inquiries on Real Commercial and seeing what stocks are out there. And I certainly wouldn't just call the leasing agent who put you in there. All those people are out there working on behalf of landlords. If you're going to go it alone without a tenant rep, don't talk to the market until you know what you want, until you've done your workspace planning and can have a strategy to attack the market. You've got an option available to you in your lease. It's I guess, a good fallback to have. Generally, we're telling tenants at the moment, don't exercise your option. If you exercise your option, you sacrifice leverage. You need to adopt all the current clauses in your current lease, and it transfers onto a new term. But what that means is, unless you negotiated your lease post-COVID, there's a lot of COVID tenant-centric clauses that you want put into your lease. And then also the market review mechanism for the commencing rent of your exercise of your option term, it will likely ignore incentives being paid in the market. So as you know, they're sky high, so you don't want to ignore those. And it will even ignore properties on the market for sublease. And as Hannah quite rightly explained, with such a high proportion of sublease stock on the market, it's setting this new bar for dragging down landlord offers, landlord terms. So keep the exercise of option up your sleeve. Be prepared really early, but generally you won't be pulling that lever. What we do in these scenarios, and this is the most common strategy we use, and it's called a stay or go. Even if a client comes to us and says, I know this space is right for me, I've got more than enough space, or the client comes to us and says, this space is terrible, we want to go, we will still exercise a stay or go, we will explore both opportunities. The greatest leverage you can have against your current landlord to stay put is to put yourself on the open market. And the greatest leverage you can have against the open market is they know that your current landlord should be making you a really, really strong offer so they don't have to lose you. So what we do in our process, we review your existing lease. We've helped you define your requirements, your marketplace strategy. And then what we do is we send out what we call a brief to the market. So that's when you talk to, we have a database of every agent, landlord and major occupier in the industry. We go to them and say, we're representing Wheel. we're looking for 500 square metres of space, and they come to us with opportunities in the time frame and fitting the bill that we're asking for. We then bring our clients a concise, call it top 20 properties that we should consider. We'll probably pick 5 or 6 of the best ones and facilitate inspections with you, and then negotiate on 3 or 4. Even if you said to us, this is the one, get us this one, we'll still negotiate on 3 or 4, because creating leverage is the best way to create savings. And then as part of our process, we go through with you and create business cases. We finalise those negotiations and help you move in on time and on budget. Hannah, you're on mute.
I'm on mute. You'd think after however long doing this, you would get the hang of it. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so say you have less than 2 years left on your lease, but you know the property is working for you and you know it's aligned with your long-term workplace strategy. How can you take advantage of the current tenant-friendly market? Insert the blend and extend strategy. So this essentially means extending your current lease term and locking yourself in for a longer period of time to receive better lease terms now.
Yeah, look, I think it's a really good strategy in order to make your current landlord come to you before you hit that open market. It gives them an opportunity to make a really strong offer to get you there.
Correct. And then tying this back to Matt's valuation 101, a landlord can increase their value by one of 2 ways, either increasing their face rents or increasing their wage. And in this market, vacancy is costly for landlords, and they're going to go to lengths to avoid them and guarantee their income for a longer term. There are multiple pros for a tenant to engage in midterm negotiations. We've said it multiple times today, and I'm sure we'll say it again. It is the tenant's market. And being able to negotiate midterm incentives in the form of capital contribution would allow you to make any upgrades to your fit out, ensuring that it is in line with your workplace strategy. It also opens up the door for renegotiation of any onerous clauses. Perhaps you can reduce your make good at the end of your tenure. But it also provides that sense of security in a space that you've obviously determined to work for you long term, especially the physical aspects, obviously, of the building. But we'll stick with the good cop, bad cop theme here. Matt, what are some of the cons?
I am good at being bad cop. I guess blend and extend, the landlord's not obligated to negotiate. You are stuck into a lease term until whatever term whatever expiry you've got left. So landlord's not obligated. We say it's unlikely to work if you've got more than 2 years left on your lease, and that's purely because you need to offer good extra tenure in order to really have an appeal for the landlord, or offer something that gives the landlord no choice. And so if you've got 2 years left and you can offer another 3 or 4 years, that's a strong, compelling argument for the landlord to engage with you. But by doing that, you're also relinquishing that flexibility, or sacrificing it. There's the most common question we get. We're cutting down our office space, but what happens if everybody comes back to the office? Yes, you are committing yourself longer term to a property. Looking at a case study we did for a client who ended up using this strategy, we worked on a blend and extend model. They wanted to cut down their size by 30% after doing a detailed workplace planning. What we were able to achieve was we added 4 years to their lease term. We got them a rental reduction under the new lease, and we released some incentive, some fit out capital through incentives that the landlord, by offering another 4-year term. So effectively, that effective rent that we talk about, the rent that you end up paying at the end of the day, we nearly halved it. So we also were able to negotiate some COVID-friendly clauses. We reduced their make good requirement and reduced their rental increases year on year as well. So there are some good pros to doing. But what if you're locked into a lease, Hannah?
So we have discussed what to do with upcoming lease expiry if the premises is working for you, but how can you reduce costs if you have remaining lease liability and the space isn't working for you? Now, I'm sure you're all familiar with the term subleasing. It is one of the most common disposal strategies, and as we have touched on, there are a huge number of occupiers currently utilising this method for one reason or another, either to reduce costs, optimise space, or consolidate sites. But subleasing, it's a standalone agreement between a tenant who already holds a lease to a commercial property, who then becomes a sublessor, to another party who wants to occupy part or all of the premises, who subsequently becomes a sublessee. So just to confirm, this is from the perspective of the sublessor. And some of the benefits of being a sublessor is that it allows a business to downsize or relocate with some cost recovery. But keeping in mind, you will be competing with high quality stock, which means you essentially need to be offering the space at a heavily reduced rate to the tenants. In saying that though, another benefit of subleasing is that because it is so widely used in the market, it is a much less onerous process, I guess, to obtain approval from the landlord, which allows the business to then recover costs quicker. And is also a strategy which doesn't really require any major upfront costs or outlay large amounts of capital to be able to secure a sublessee. Matt, what are some of the cons?
Yeah, look, you become the landlord. You need to be comfortable with the tenant that is being engaged to you to cover the rent. And at the same time, they need to be comfortable with your financials. So they know that landlords, they don't know you. They need to be confident that if they are providing you with their rent, that it's being passed on to the landlord. There are some inherent risks for them by having you as a middleman between them and the landlord. There are landlord consent costs and costs of finding that tenant. You will remain liable under your original lease. That means you'll still probably remain liable for your bank guarantee. You'll have make good requirements still at the end of that sublease period, unless it's negotiated well. So the advice from a recovery of cost perspective is we are telling tenants not to expect to recuperate more than 50% really of the rent that you're currently paying in attracting a subtenant. Subtenants know that they're going to get a good deal. Like Anna said, this is from the perspective of the sublessor. When we're advising a client on where the best deals are in the market, we're going after those spaces that companies are trying to dispose of because they're the best deals out there. And then lastly, you've got to find a subtenant who has the same tenure ambitions that you have. If you've got 4 years left on your lease and you find a subtenant for 3 years, what are you going to do with that last year of your lease? So you've really got to find someone who matches up to your current lease expiry.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, so what about a lease assignment? So an assignment is where the entirety of the lease is transferred to a new company. And this includes the entire interest of the lease, and the incoming tenant agrees to assume the rights and obligations as per the existing lease. Again, this is from the perspective of the assignor, and some benefits of being able to assign your lease and becoming the assignor is the potential to release all of your lease obligations, including the make good to the assignee. In some circumstances as well, you will be able to have your bank guarantee returned in replacement of the incoming tenants, which will obviously unlock further capital back into your business. And I know this would obviously, one of the most important things for you CFOs is that you'll be able to remove it from the liability on the balance sheet. And Matt, please take us through some of the cons.
Yeah, look, you're going to have a lease that likely was put in place pre-COVID. So now you've got to find a tenant who agrees to take over all the obligations of the lease that you already have. So there can be variations negotiated, but then you're getting landlord involved where they don't need to be there. There are associated costs, again, finding another tenant, and then the landlord's costs. As an assignor, you may still remain liable as a guarantor over the lease. And in some circumstances, the incentive is actually not transferable to a replacement tenant. So you've got to be confident that the incentive that you were awarded is able to be given to an assignee. Landlord may not have to agree. It's difficult for them to not to, but you've got to find a tenant that provides the same covenant, the same financial security that they have. Otherwise, you will have issues. And the cost is high. An assignment requires an upfront capital payment to get someone to take over your lease.
Thanks, Matt. A lease surrender is probably one of the most uncommon out of the 4 strategies that we have discussed today, just because there's a number of variables to align to make it a seamless process. And just as the name sounds, a lease surrender is when the tenant gives up their interest in the property back to the landlord. As a tenant, There are a number of obvious benefits if you're able to agree with your landlord to surrender your lease. You are immediately released from your liability and ongoing obligations. Also, depending on the incoming tenant and other negotiation points, you may be released of having to perform a make good to be able to leave the premises in an as-is condition. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of variables that need to align to be able to get a surrender across the line with the landlord, which Matt will take.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, the landlord doesn't have to, and they're going to be very reluctant in this market to take back space unless they know that they can get at least sooner than your surrender payment will run out. They're going to be very reluctant to take it back. There are consent costs and exit costs, so it is a capital intensive, probably the most intensive strategy, and it's not a quick execution. Looking at I guess that same client that we did the blend and extend for, we also went through the process of looking at what would a sublease assignment or surrender look like. So under a sublease, you can see that we were prepared to accept less rent in return for not paying out an incentive. So it just became a good cheap space for a tenant to move into. Under an assignment, the tenant comes in and pays the rent that you're paying under the lease, but then there is a gross incentive that was required to meet the market to bring that effective rent down. And under a surrender, you don't have as intensive a cost because you're not finding a replacement tenant, but the capital required to the landlord is intensive. In addition, under an assignment and surrender, you'll have your full make good requirements. You'll probably have to pay out the landlord, and it's hard to negotiate that amount. Where under a sublease, you've probably got a higher chance at the end of that sublease to have a real negotiation on what your make good requirements would be. So recovering 30 to 40% of the rent that you're paying under your lease, and varying degrees of capital required. I guess so. When do you pull these levers? So we've talked about sublease. If you only want to give up some of your space, sublease is generally the only option available to you. It's basically a new lease if you're doing anything else. But there are inherent security risks under an assignment, especially with a full transfer of lease or sublease, that you need to be really confident with. Assignment and surrender are far more unlikely for a landlord to agree to. So sublease may be your only option in that respect. But under an assignment, you've got to have favourable terms under your current lease. And under a surrender, really the only chance of the landlord taking back the space is if you're currently paying under market in rent, or if you create the circumstance where the landlord knows he's got no other option but to take your surrender agreement. And that's just negotiation strategies, I guess. There are other options available to you. There are no two projects that we deal with are the same. It's very much a conversation that we have with clients. We really need you to bring to us your issue, and we'll sit down with you and work out the right strategy or strategies and execute them concurrently. We have, in some circumstances, for an example, moved a client within the landlord's portfolio. So they were willing to accept a surrender to move to another building, but remaining within that portfolio. So there are some custom strategies that we can work on with you. But I guess, yeah, no two deals are the same. So bring us your problems.
Great, thanks, Matt. I know this is probably information overload for everyone today, but if there's anything, I guess, to take away from today, please let it be this. Don't talk to the market until you've done your workplace strategy and understand your space needs. This is something that should be done as a first priority because it obviously dictates the strategy and your messaging to the market from day one. Timing creates leverage. It is imperative you have enough time to ascertain your needs, search for a suitable space, to be able to negotiate with your landlords, especially when you're actually dictated by a timeline, such as an upcoming lease expiry. Because you don't want to be in a situation where you have run out of time to assess your options. You will lose your leverage and essentially have your backup against the wall with your landlord. As Matt mentioned earlier, always engage in a stay versus go strategy, especially when looking at a renewal. Rarely do we ever advise our clients to exercise their options over the space. The only way to get leverage and create competitive tension with your landlord is to make them think you are assessing market options, even if it is just to benchmark your space against the market. And following on from Matt's point just before, subleasing isn't the only disposal strategy. There are other ways a business can recover costs if the current workspace isn't aligned with your needs. And lastly, understanding what's important to your landlord will help develop your negotiation strategy to ensure you get the most favourable outcome, especially if you're looking to engage in mid-term negotiations. If the landlord's more focused in higher rent in the short term, or are they more focused on the longer WALE? You know, these are important factors which will influence the commercial terms you will be able to achieve. But now I will hand over to our National Chairman, John Isaacs, who's going to take us through a portfolio consolidation case study, which will hopefully bring a lot of the content we've discussed today to a real example.
Thanks a lot, Hannah. And thank you for having me. So,
Thank you.
So, as Hannah and Matt have said, until recently, I was at Clemenger Group for over 22 years, and I was the CFO of that company in the last 10 years. The Clemenger Group is a group of well over 30 businesses in the marketing and advertising area, and the way that the business grew was not only organically but by purchasing other businesses. So when we purchased a business, obviously each business came with its own lease, its own legacy lease. Usually the lease was done by the proprietor of that business. The leases usually had lots of issues. And so the first thing we did back in 2001 was employ the advice of a tenant advisor. And we actually, because I guess property is such an important part of your expense. I mean, in a business the size of Clemenger, which was over $500 million in revenue, and rent and associated costs was around 5 to 10% of that. Saving 1% could add $5 million to your profit. So straight to the bottom line. So really, it was such a crucial part of what I did as a CFO, was controlling the costs of the rent and the premises. And with the tenant advisor, who we work with very, very closely, we were able to get it down to around, I think it was five buildings in Australia and 2 in New Zealand. So it was a fantastic effort, but could not have been done without the use of a tenant advisor. And everything that Hannah and Matt have spoken to you about previously is true. And I even at the end of this, the key takeaways is such an important thing. It's when you go to market, you've really got to, you've got to listen to your tenant advisor and not get out there and give too much information, because these property people, it's a very incestuous business and everyone knows everything that's happening. And so you've really got to keep it to yourself and really control the message you want to go to the market. And that, another key takeaway I have is that you've really got to keep the team that decides on your property moves very, very small, because everyone in your business knows somebody in the property business and wants to talk to somebody. And as soon as somebody starts to talk, it gets out there and then everyone knows what you're doing. So next slide, Hannah, that's just the beginning of it. Look, without getting into any obviously confidential nature of what's happening, I mean, I did want to talk to you about the latest consolidation, which I'm still working with the group on, which is in Melbourne, and it's moving 16 businesses in four different leases, two locations into one building into the city over 5 levels. As you can imagine, it's an incredibly complicated. It has been a complicated process. We probably started the process 2 years ago, and we will be moving in on probably January 2024. So really, this has been probably a 4-year process from when we started getting our ducks in a row to actually signing the lease, which was beginning of this year, to actually then getting the premises ready, working with the builders and the property owner, and then doing the fit out. So, you know, and very difficult because you're talking about 16 different businesses in marketing and advertising and communications, you know, where you got government lobbying business that want to be in the city next to the government offices. You've got advertising, you want to be in Cremorne. You've got media, you want to be in South Melbourne. You've got research, you want to be in South Yarra. So trying to get everyone to agree was quite a difficult task. But what I want to talk to you about is what we did to get everyone to agree and to move into one premises. And then a little bit about the establishing the team to do the fit out, lessons learned, but crucial across the whole thing was having the tenant advisor involved. So firstly, I guess we did a workplace strategy, and I think, Hannah, very similar to your slide that you had. The strategy that we developed was obviously will be different to your businesses because each business has their, you know, operates in their own area. But our strategy in advertising and marketing was to create a premises which was a habitat for creativity, a place for the new hybrid way of working, harnessing the power of being together, a destination where people wanted to come to work together, and a place where we could do our best work. And the one thing that we established was that we do our best work when we're together. So we really wanted to have a place where people wanted to go to. So the first thing was the location, and that was not just where our staff are, but where were our clients? You know, where do our clients need parking? Do our staff need parking? What will get our staff to come to work, and whether or not it needed to be city fringe, and then, you know, the different types of buildings. So then we talked about the branding. You know, how do we want to portray ourselves? You know, are we an international type of agency that wanted to be in the city, or do you want to be a Melbourne fringe agency in Cremorne or South Melbourne? What type of building did we want to be presented in? Did we want to be in a high rise, or did we want to be in you know, in our own type of building? Do we want a warehouse? Did we want to be flashy looking or not flashy looking? Did we want to be unique? Did we want to have heritage features? Did we want to have high ceilings? Did we want to have, you know, ceilings that are exposed? So all these things were things that we had to consider when we were looking at buildings. Then, you know, the space required per person. We had to think about, you know, we used to use a rule of, I think it was when I first started in the industry, it was like 1 to 20 per square meter. Now it's down to about 1 to 8. But then within that, you sort of, you had to think about the fit out and how that space was being used. Was it you know, during the lockdown, a lot of people really enjoyed having their quiet time to make their quiet conversations, whether it was you know, a work-related conversation, or whether it was talking to their you know, their mother or their plumber, or, you know, they wanted a place to go to have that quiet conversation. And in the fit out that you do, you've got to have those areas, even when you're working to the 1 to 8 per square meter. So it was really crucial that you thought about the fit out when you're thinking about the building that you're going to. And then obviously the budget was a real thing. In doing all these considerations, we kept the team really small. I think there was about 3 of us. We didn't let anyone else know about what we were looking at within the big business, and we worked very, very closely with the tenant advisor, who was leading us the whole way and telling us what we couldn't say to the market, how we were putting out little tidbits of information that we wanted the market to know, what we wanted our landlord to know. It was crucial the whole way through this. So then once we established the building that we wanted, Hannah, the next slide, please. We then had to do the lease negotiation. And I guess this is a really crucial point because, you know, there are so many things, and I think you got in the bottom here that tenant CS, we can advise you on 40 points of negotiation. I just put 8 down here on this slide that are just really, you know, can really make a difference when you're talking about the rent that you're paying. I mean, when it's incentives, so break clauses, you know, we always put in our leases the ability to break at it maybe halfway through for maybe 1/3 of the floor, to make good clauses, you know, really crucial to try and get rid of them. The length of the term versus the actual rent, you know, 7 years, 10 years, 5 years, when you're depreciating a fit out can really affect your bottom line. Obviously incentives, and we didn't know much about incentives. We needed the tenant advisor to advise us on that. You know, the annual increases and reviews, you know, a difference, a 3% review increase against a 4% can really have a marked difference over 7 years. And when there's a market review, can you review down, or is it ratcheted so that you can't go down? These are things that our tenant advisors advise us on and really helped us all the way through. So Hannah, the next slide. So then once we agreed on the AFL, which by the way probably took us 2 weeks of discussion with teams of lawyers. It was a really crucial part for us to get that right. Then we the next bit, which I won't go into too much detail because it's not really pertinent to this conversation, but it's what we're doing at the moment, which is, you know, actually working with the property owner and his builder, and then working with our consultants to come up with a fit out. So this will be probably a 2-year process, but it's crucial, again, you know, establishing your own internal team, engaging the third parties. For us, that was bringing on board an experienced project manager who was able to then, you know, help us appoint through a tender process the appropriate architect, then the appropriate other consultants, from everything from mechanical consultants, acoustic, you name it. We had to get the right people on board. So, and Hannah, next slide, please. So then, you know, we're going through this at the moment on this project, which is the design, keeping it within the time and the money. And again, even on this stage, which is still going to be an 18-month project, our tenant advisor is on call and helping us along the way, because there are so many different areas that as a CFO of a business in marketing and advertising, you didn't understand the property business as well as a tenant advisor did. So that's really it. I mean the key lessons, Hannah, the next slide, is when you're looking at for a property is you know, do a debrief after, see what you did well and what needs improvement. But I guess the real key message is the last point, which is controlling the message to the market to be able to create leverage when you're negotiating against a property owner, or, you know, whether you're staying in your current lease or whether you're moving premises. Information is key, and the more you talk, and as I think Matt said at the beginning, you know, as soon as you go onto realestate.com or Real Commercial or any of those sites, you've given away a little bit of leverage. So first step, and I do say this as the national chairman of Tenant CS, is to ring one of our advisors, get them on board, and devise a strategy. So thank you very much.
Amazing. Thanks, John. Adriana, should I hand back to you to take control of the Q&A?
Hello. Thank you very much. That was fantastic. Yeah, we do actually have a couple of questions coming through. So from Annie Marie, we have, what is your advice for smaller locations such as 100 square meters? is an advisor budget friendly for a smaller organisation?
I guess the answer depends on the magnitude of savings. If you're in Rialto, sure. Look, we don't charge if we don't add value. If we can't add value, we don't charge. If it's too small for us to charge, we're still going to have that conversation with you and set you on the right path. There are plenty of times that we've said, look, go and find the property you like, send us the heads of agreement, we'll give you some advice. You know, our words don't cost you anything. So it's case by case basis, but you know, we're happy to help.
Matt, you told us to get started by not talking to a leasing agent or landlord about a new lease term. Who do we talk to about getting started?
Yeah, good point. Look, so yeah, don't talk to your leasing agent, don't talk to your managing agent, don't go on Real Commercial. I gave you all the don'ts. What you really want to do, you want to go and, I mean, your workspace planning, you need to be absolutely sure of what outcome you want to achieve. Even if that is, I don't know whether I want to stay or go, you want to be sure of that as a business before you start exploring. When we say get a TR involved as the next step, if you don't want to do that, you really need to cover all bases in terms of every agency in the target area that you're looking. So if you're looking for a CBD property, you want to go it alone. If you go on Real Commercial and you inquire on a Collier's property, not to poo-poo them, but just as an example, you will likely first off see the properties that they have in their portfolio that they have available for lease. Then you'll inquire on a CBRE property and you'll see what properties that they've got in their books. You need to make sure that you're covering every agency direct from institutional landlords if it's the right size or quality that you're looking for. You know, you want to go to Fitzroy's and Gross Waddell. Sorry, these are all Melbourne agencies, but you know, independents that control stock as well. Find your market, find which agents control your market, and then make sure you're inquiring through all of them. What we do is we make sure that every agent and every landlord is covered with our briefs. So I guess it's like putting a property on Seek, putting a job on Seek versus engaging a recruiter. A recruiter can find you the person you need, where if you put your job on Seek, you'll get all the applications to you, and that's part of the advantage we add.
Great. Another question to Matthew. I have been shown spaces and have been told that the incentive has already been accounted for in the fit out. Is this true, and how does this work?
I get this. So there's this look, landlords had masses of stock available to them through COVID. They were sitting on these vacancies and they go to their agents and they say, what do I do? So agents have said, well, carve them up into small suites, put a new fit out in there while they're sitting there vacant anyway, and we'll find you a tenant who will pay you a higher rent. There's that tick for, you know, improving asset value. And you've already pre-spent their incentive. So when they come along, we'll say, look at this shiny new fit out. You don't need an incentive because it's there. So they're calling them spec suites. That, you know, landlords like GPT have carved up, I think, 30,000 square meters of their portfolio into smaller speculative suites. There are incentives still out there for those landlords that are still offering spec suites. If not today, then in 6 months' time, when those spec suites are still sitting there vacant, there are certainly going to be incentives on top. You know, these spec suites that they're offering, that they're designed as a you know, one fits all purpose. That there's, you know, we talked about workplace strategy. You know, John said that there's no two companies that are the same in the requirements they need. So how come all of a sudden these landlords are splitting them up into premises that, you know, it's putting a round peg in a square hole? You really need to be careful taking on a spec suite, and I guess be prepared to build your own fit out, or at least tailor a fit out to suit your workplace strategy. You know, there's good logic to these spec suites. It's saving you on construction costs, on the capital outlay, on stresses of, you know, supply chain issues. But it's difficult to find a space that really suits your company style.
Yeah, I think some tenants as well really benefit from going into a fully fitted option for them though, because they will walk into a vacant space and have no idea sort of how to picture what they need or see it come to life. So they sort of put it in a too hard basket and just only want to consider something that's plug and play. They can turn up on day one and it's all done for them.
I can definitely see the appeal of that.
Yeah.
If there's an incentive on top.
Yeah.
There is lots of great questions. Please keep them coming. Another is how do we go about pulling together a workplace strategy, and how do we work out what we actually do need?
Good question. As John said, put together your internal stakeholders first. I did have a great client who said, interview all my staff and find out, we want to bring them back to the office. What's the best thing they've got at home that we can put into this new office space? They're great, that this company was inclusive, but then all of a sudden, if you're asking too many people what they want, you've also got to tell too many people that they're not getting what they want. So put together an independent or an internal, stakeholder panel that's made up of not just management, but you want to change, you want to vary the demographic, and then put some structure around what location, where does everybody live, what features do we want in the office, what's important to us by way of environmental and sustainability initiatives, and public transport, all that jazz. So again, we're happy to guide people if that's a priority.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's fantastic. I kind of wish that we were finding a new office, but no, another time soon we'll give you a call. But on that note, we are going to wrap up. Please, anyone on the call, please do get in contact with Hannah, Matthew, or Jonathan if you do want to chat anything about any of your needs. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to help. Very, very knowledgeable. From us at Wheel, we just really would like to thank the Tenant CS team. We learned a lot, very valuable, and I hope you all found it very valuable as well. It is our mission in life at this community is to provide really interesting content. So again, if there's something that you really would like to hear about next, please do get in contact. Any way that we can help find ways you can save money or make your life or your company better, we'll do our best. I'm not sure if I can make your life much better, but we really will try. On that note, thank you, Tony. Thanks for the session. Great content, well presented, and very helpful all around. I do agree. I echo that.
Thank you, Tony.
For everyone else on the call, we will be sending around handouts, the slides, a recording. So if there's anything you want to jump back into, you will be able to. And next steps for the CFO community, we have launched the CFO Awards. So if you are working with a great finance team member, a financial controller, a CFO, I have included the link in the chat bot there. So if there's anyone that you'd like to nominate, please do. It's the first time I think there is any CFO awards running across the company, across Australia. So we really want to celebrate all the great things that you do in supporting small businesses across Australia and enterprise, not just small business. So nominate your colleagues, nominate yourself if you want, and please do get in contact with Tenant CS if you have any questions. So I hope you have a great day and we will see you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ciao, bye.